I still remember the heavy weight of my suitcase pulling on my arm as I stood right in front of the gate of that luxury beach resort. I could hardly believe it, but I had actually made it. There I was, on the paradise island of Koh Lanta, and I was actually going to stay at this incredibly fancy place right by the ocean. By the way, I am Achara, a 17-year-old girl from Krabi Town. Even though this place looked like a dream vacation spot, I was not there to relax. I was on a mission to reunite with a boy I had saved 10 years ago. To be honest, I had almost forgotten he even existed. That was until last week, when I was scrolling through Facebook and saw a post from Thomas. He is a famous British swimmer now, and he was searching for the mystery girl who had saved his life when he was just a kid. Since he was in Thailand for work, I knew I had to come and see him again. The sun was warm on my skin as I waited by the gate, feeling a mix of excitement and nerve. Suddenly, I heard the noise of wheels hitting the pavement behind me. I turned around and saw two other girls, roughly my age, standing there with their luggage. I felt a bit suspicious, wondering who they were and why they were showing up at Thomas's place. Before I could even open my mouth to ask, the gate creaked open. A friendly-looking woman appeared and invited all of us to come inside. We followed her into a spacious living room that smelled faintly of expensive jasmine. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Danvish, Thomas's housekeeper. She told us that Thomas was away in another city for his training schedule and would not be back for a couple of days. Then she introduced the other. There was a girl with short hair named Sarai and another girl with longer hair named Kanda. Mrs. Danvish seemed a bit amused by the whole situation. She chuckled and said that it was quite a surprise to have three different girls all claiming to be the person who saved Thomas. However, she was confident that the truth would eventually be revealed. She told us to stay at the resort and make ourselves feel at home until Thomas returned. I could feel my blood starting to boil since I knew those girls were posing as me. We all stood there glaring at one another in a very tense silence. It was just unbelievable that they would try such a thing. But I told myself not to worry too much. Once Thomas got back, he would definitely recognize that I was the real one and kick those imposters out of his house. After dropping my suitcase off in my room, I headed downstairs for dinner. I could already feel the tension in the air as I entered the dining room. Sarai and Kanda were already there, sitting at the long table, like they owned the place. The moment I pulled out my chair, Sarai dropped her act. She looked at Kanda and me with such rudeness and told us to stop acting, claiming she knew we were both pretending to be her so we could get our hands on Thomas's fortune. Kanda didn't hold back either. She scoffed and called Sarai the fake one, pointing out that Sarai had clearly done her homework by showing up with curly hair and a fake mole. Honestly, those two were so audacious they were really starting to get on my nerves. Right then, Mrs. Danvish walked in. A waiter followed her, pushing a trolley loaded with the most incredible-looking food I had ever seen. The smells of seasoned meats and fresh herbs filled the room. Suddenly, like a flick of a switch, the two imposters changed. They replaced their icy glares with bright, fake smiles and started acting as sweet as pie. It honestly gave me the shiver. Mrs. Danvish told us to help ourselves to the food and drink. She said that once we were all well rested, we would have a little chat the next morning. I tried to eat, but it was hard to enjoy such a delicious meal with those two vultures staring me down the whole time. I finished as fast as I could and rushed back to my room. I spent the night rereading Thomas's old interviews on my phone, making sure I was perfectly prepared for whatever was coming. The next morning, a maid led me out to the garden for breakfast. The sun was shining, but the atmosphere at the table was cold. Kanda scowled at me the second I sat down, and Sarai was aggressively sawing through her omelet with a knife, as if she were imagining it was me. I was just about to grab some food when Mrs. Danvish appeared. She sat down and after wishing us a good morning, got straight to the point. She said she was curious and wanted to know exactly where each of us had first met Thomas. Kanda jumped in first, acting like it was an easy question. She claimed they met right here on this island when she was 10 years old, while she was out collecting shells on the beach. Sarai practically shouted with excitement, telling Kanda she was busted because she was only 7 years old back then. Kanda just sat there looking absolutely dumbstruck. I thought to myself how careless that was of her. Thomas had clearly stated in an interview that he was 8 years old at the time, and the girl who saved him was a year younger. When it was my turn, I told the truth. I explained that I met Thomas when I was 7. My father worked as a helmsman back then, so I used to follow him to the island quite often. One day I saw Thomas sitting all by himself on the sand. I was bored waiting for my dad, so I went over to say hello and we ended up hanging out together the entire day. Sarai quickly chimed in to finish the story. She said that later that afternoon, Thomas got a cramp while swimming and would have drowned if it wasn't for her. She claimed she saved him, and then she and her father took him to the hospital. unforgettable. Mrs. Danvish listened to all of us without saying a word. Once we were done, she noted that the girl Thomas remembered was indeed 7 years old. She turned a very stern look toward Kanda, who began to stammer. Kanda tried to play it off as a mistake, saying she just misremembered because she was so young and could easily get confused. Mrs. Danvish didn't say anything else, but I caught a knowing look in her eye. I knew things were getting serious when I went down to dinner that night and saw only 2 places set at the table. Kanda was nowhere to be found. The following morning, I decided to enjoy the beautiful weather. I was lounging on a beach chair, tucked away in my favorite book, when a shadow suddenly blocked out the sun. I looked up to see Sarai smirking down at me. She told me I should enjoy myself while I could, because I would be the next one to leave. I didn't let her intimidate me. I told her that even if she had memorized every single newspaper article, it wouldn't be enough to fool the real Thomas. She got so angry she could barely speak. She raised her hand, looking like she was about to slap me right across the face, but then someone stopped her. I looked up and saw a tall, handsome guy holding her arm. He told Sarai quite calmly that violence was not the answer. Sarai just gave him a nasty look and asked who he thought he was to be lecturing her. He introduced himself as Eli, Thomas's assistant. Sarai made an annoyed sound under her breath and strutted away. Eli turned to me and kindly asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, but I just couldn't believe the nerve of someone who could lie so boldly like that. After that, Eli and I ended up going for a long stroll along the shoreline. The sound of the waves was so peaceful as we talked. He mentioned that I seemed exactly like the person Thomas had described to him, which made me feel a little more confident. Since Eli seemed to be on my side and was so easy to talk to, I figured I'd take the chance to learn more about Thomas. I started asking him all sorts of things, like what Thomas liked to eat, his favorite color, and even what movies he enjoyed watching. I brought up how I had spoken to Miss Danvish, the housekeeper, the day before. I remarked that she seemed to know just about everything there was to know about Thomas. Eli nodded and explained that she was actually his nanny growing up. He told me that Thomas's parents were always traveling or tied up with their busy schedules, so Mrs. Danvish was the one who really raised him. Because of that, Thomas is still incredibly fond of. To show me what he meant, Eli pulled out his phone and showed me an old picture. In the photo, Mrs. Danvish was hugging a little boy with a huge, bright smile. I stared at the screen, surprised to see that Thomas had bright blonde hair when he was little. It was such a contrast to the brown hair he has now, though I guess it just naturally darkened as he grew up. I was so caught up in my thoughts about the photo that I completely stopped paying attention to where I was walking. My foot caught on a jagged rock and I felt myself starting to fall. Before I could hit the sand, Eli's arms reached out and caught me, steadying me so I wouldn't tumble over. He looked at me with genuine concern and asked if I was all right. I felt my face get incredibly hot, and I'm sure I was blushing a deep shade of red. I couldn't understand what was happening to me at that moment. My heart started thudding against my ribs like crazy, and I felt so flustered just being that close to him. That night, Sarai and I were back in the dining room, locked in a silent stare-off while we waited for dinner to be served. The air was so thick with tension you could almost touch it. Suddenly the door opened and a man walked in carrying 2 bright bouquets of sunflowers. It was him. It was Tom. Eli was following just a few steps behind. My heart skipped a beat because wow, he was even more handsome in person than in his photos. I couldn't help but think that my best friend Dara should have been the one standing here to see this. I had begged her to come, but she just wouldn't listen to me. Before I even had a chance to say hello, Sarai practically flew across the room and threw her arms around Thomas. She started putting on this huge emotional act, telling him how they were finally reunited, and claiming that not a single day had gone by without her thinking of him. It was so fake I wanted to roll my eye. Thomas looked pretty uncomfortable. He gently pushed her away and scratched his head, suggesting that we should all just have dinner first and save the talking for later. The meal looked delicious, but I was too focused on my mission to really enjoy it. Every time I tried to start a conversation with Thomas, that awful Sarai would jump in and cut me off. Then, she made a big mistake. She leaned in and told Thomas that ever since they first met, the image of a cute, brown-haired boy had been burned into her heart. I saw Thomas freeze for a second and trade a very specific look with Eli. I knew this was my moment. I looked right at her and corrected her, asking if she meant blonde. I turned to Thomas and explained that she only thought he had brown hair because she had never actually seen him as a child, which proved she was a total fraud. Thomas looked at me, completely stunned, and then turned to Sarai with such disappointment. She started panicking, blurting out that it wasn't what it looked like and begging him to listen to her. But Thomas had heard enough. He told her very sternly that he could actually sue her for impersonation and fraud. He warned her that if she didn't want to get into serious trouble, she needed to get out of there immediately. Sarai looked like she was about to burst into tears. She stuttered something helpless, grabbed her things, and bolted out of the room. Once she was gone, Thomas reached out and grabbed my hand. He gave me a warm smile and told me he had finally found me. He had finally weeded out all the liars, and yet looking at his happy face, I felt this heavy wave of guilt wash over me. I glanced over at Eli, who was smiling brightly at the scene, and I felt a strange pang in my chest. Why was I wishing it wasn't Thomas holding my hand right then? I let out a quiet sigh, feeling more confused than ever. The next morning, I took Thomas back to my hometown to show him around. We were strolling along the shore of the Krabby River, the water sparkling in the sun. When I spotted Dara sitting on a bench, I felt a surge of relief that she actually showed up. I walked him over and introduced them, telling Thomas that this was my best friend Dara, and telling her that this was the guy I had been talking about. They both looked at each other with these surprised expressions, almost like they felt a spark. Right on cue, my phone started ringing. I used it as the perfect excuse to give them some space. I told them I had to take the call and that they should go on ahead without me. As I walked away, I made sure to wink at Dara and whispered to her that I had done my best, and now it was her turn to take over. I took a long walk to give them plenty of time, but when I finally came back, I found Thomas sitting all by himself, staring out at the water. I wondered where Dara had gone. When he saw me, he stood up and told me that Dara had something to do, so she had to leave early. He suggested that we should probably get going too. My heart sank a little. It seemed like my plan wasn't going as smoothly as I hoped. On our way back to my house, the silence felt heavy, so I finally turned to Thomas and asked if Dara had explained everything to him. He just looked at me with a confused expression and said he wasn't sure what I meant, though she did mention some cool spots to visit in town. I felt so frustrated. That meant he still had no clue about the truth. I couldn't believe silly Dara had stayed quiet after all the effort I put into bringing him here. Then, Thomas looked thoughtful and told me something had just popped into his head. He asked if I remembered what kind of flower I had given him when I took him to the hospital all those years ago. I paused to think. He had brought me sunflowers before, so I figured that must be the answer. I told him confidently that of course I remembered, and that I had given him a sunflower because I wanted to cheer him up. I was waiting for him to nod in agreement, but instead he just let out a long sigh. He admitted that he had actually just made that question up, and there were never any flowers at all. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't want to be caught in a lie like those other girls. If Dara was too scared to tell him the truth herself, then I realized I would just have to do it for her. I started to splutter, telling him how sorry I was, and that I had a confession to make. I told him the whole story, that the person who really saved him that day was Dara, not me. I explained that she was going through a really hard time, because ever since her father's accident, he couldn't take his boat out anymore, and her family was in terrible debt. I told him that when I saw his post, I tried to convince her to come forward so he could help her family. I remembered how Dara had cried, saying she couldn't let him see her in such an awful state because he would think she was only after his money. No matter how much I pushed, she refused to meet him. So I confessed to Thomas that I decided to disguise myself as her and approach him first, hoping to reunite them later. Thomas looked so surprised and a bit disappointed. He asked if she had even agreed to the plan. I shook my head and told him she hadn't, and that I had done everything on my own. I told him how I kept asking her for details about the past and spent all my savings on hair and makeup just to fake a mole like her. I even told him about lying to my parents about a summer camp just so I could go to Koh Lanta. I told him I had arranged the meeting today, but it seemed like she just wasn't ready to talk. Thomas sighed again and said that when he saw Dara, he felt a strange connection to her, but since she left so quickly, he worried she didn't want to see him again. I felt a wave of panic hit. I had wanted to bring them together, but now I was terrified I had just driven them apart for good. It has been 3 days since that heavy conversation, and there I was, pacing nervously in the airport lobby. I had asked Dara to meet me there, but as the minutes ticked by, things were not looking good. I started to feel a bit hurt, wondering if she really wouldn't even bother to come say goodbye before I left the country. Eli looked at me with a really kind, understanding expression. He told me that it seemed like Dara wasn't going to show up and said he was sorry, but we really had to go so we wouldn't miss the flight. I let out a sad sigh and started pulling my suitcase toward the gate. Just as I was losing hope, I heard a voice calling out my name from across the terminal. It was Dara running toward us as fast as she could. Oh boy, I was so relieved I wanted to jump for joy, but I quickly hid my smile. I put on a sulky, annoyed face and asked her if she finally decided to show up since I thought she wasn't coming. Then I grabbed Thomas's arm and told her that my boyfriend and I were off to London to meet his family. I looked at Thomas and called him Babe, saying his family was so eager to meet his savior. I turned back and gave Dara a big hug, thanking her for coming to send me off. Dara looked so awkward and confused, which was exactly what I wanted. She took my hand and pulled me aside, whispering if she could please talk to Thomas in private for just a minute. Inside, I was screaming with joy because my plan had actually worked. I turned to Eli and gave him a big thumbs up. We both rushed off toward the seating area, leaving Dara and Thomas alone to finally talk. Eli and I sat on a bench a good distance away, but we could still see the two of them talking to each other. I had to laugh to myself. Did anyone really think I would let those two idiots give up on each other so easily? No way. I had actually discussed everything with Thomas beforehand. We planned this whole cheesy farewell at the airport just to stir up Dara's heart. And voila, in that hit-or-miss moment, she finally realized how she felt, and they had a beautiful, happy reunion. So, what about me? Well, as I sat there with Eli enjoying a drink and looking at his bright smile, I realized you don't have to worry about me at all. I might have just scored a cute, handsome assistant of my own. I couldn't help but giggle at how perfectly everything turned out.